All right, everybody, this is going to be a short turnaround between part 1 and this video, which is part 2 for the Camper Shell 10.0 build series. The reason for the short turnaround, well, is during these initial construction phases, I'm getting a lot done. Now, the roof, probably, if you guys have seen the prior video, is the most obvious addition. I'm going to come back to that, so just hold off on that. Real quick, though, one thing I will say about fast progress, I think I've been working on this 8 days, somewhere around there, and certainly I've gotten a lot done. But one thing I've noted working on these projects a lot is there will be stages where you can get a lot done really quick, and it gives you the perception the progress is, or the project itself is going to finish up quick. But then there's other stages, like the fine details, for example, that are going to slow way down. So I'm making a lot of really good progress here. It's certainly faster than, you know, a traditional truck camper would be, but there's still a lot of work to be had. But let's get into it. So other than the roof, which, as a side note, this is a mock-up, so this is not permanently installed, but I'm going to talk about the proof of concept of that in a second. But I've got all of the skin, or all of the sheathing on the side walls. So this is that same Cedar fence picket board. I just buy it at Lowe's. Plane it down to 1/2 inch. We've talked about that. And then this is the lap joint method that will prevent this from leaking. So if you guys see right here, I have my router table with the fence set up here. And this is cut about 1/4 inch down. Okay, so I cut it on one side here, and then I reverse the cut. Actually, let me come over here where the light's a little brighter. I reverse the cut here and there. So you guys see that alternating pattern? I start from the bottom going up. So if water were running down, you know, it would have to go backwards. But like I showed in the last video, there is that DAP Ultra Dynaflex caulking that runs down the entire seam between these two boards at the lap joint and against the board here. And when that dries, it's going to provide a really strong adhesive bond, waterproof it, and allow the boards to expand and contract. So it's a little bit tedious, but you just cut each board. I usually plane down a batch at one time, cut the lap joints on my router table here, and just start from one corner and roll on. Now, what I did on this one, just to kind of make sure everything stayed even, is when I mounted the boards, I kind of would rotate back and forth, side to side, instead of just doing one whole wall. I don't know if that matters, but it's something I do just to kind of balance it out, especially in a situation like this where this is just sitting on sawhorses, obviously. Now, this is going to have a really big door on it, and the reasoning behind that is, you can open that door up, and Paul, the guy building this for his truck, he could still use this for utility purposes, because you guys can imagine you could still fit a lot into the bed of your pickup truck with this. The door will be a little smaller in this opening because at a later stage, the entire circumference will be with hardwood, and which will take up 2 inches of the overall width. Okay, so other than getting all the skin on, the next thing I had to do is down here. Now, you guys see this little angle here. I'm going to insert a picture when I edit the video of the back of his pickup truck, but when this slides down, this will be on the tailgate side. This little curve right here has to match the irregular curve on his particular pickup truck. Now, what we did is we made a template right here. So you imagine this is the tailgate side, and this is that sloping angle, which will mesh perfectly up against the side of his bed rail there at that opening. And so when I cut these, I use that template and cut these. Now, I fully expect that I will have to modify that slightly because I cut it just a hair big. Like I talked about before, my biggest concern is waterproofing this seam. Now, when I do the final install on the truck, I will mask everything off and put a really nice bead of caulking down there to waterproof that. But I want the wood as close as possible, obviously. Let me zoom this in a little bit here. So what I'm going to do, though, is Paul's going to bring his truck over tomorrow. And before I get too much additional weight on this camper, we're going to actually take this off, dry fit it in there, make sure everything is lining up just right. I'll trim this. I feel very confident I'll have to trim this up a little bit, but we'll get that fit just right. Make sure everything is square and sitting where it's supposed to be. And then the next step will be putting on the roof. Okay, so I want to caveat and say that I've never installed a roof exactly this way. So this is theoretical on my part. And it's going to have a couple advantages, but let me show you what I'm going to do. Okay, so usually I would build beams that would run across. In all of my other campers, that's what I did. The beams would go across, and then I would lay the plywood over those beams and attach it. Here, what I did is, if you guys look right here, on this further outside piece, I made it just a little bit tall, and I made a little pocket right here. You'll see how that plywood fits in there, and I made it a little bit tall. This will be trimmed off flush later. And then I cut two pieces. It took 2 pieces of 1/2 inch plywood, or I'm sorry, 1/4 inch plywood, as you guys could see right here, and I cut them the same width. Okay, and I left a little bit of an overhang here because I'll when I do the final install, I'll have a little overhang on the back here. Now, the way I determine the width is, working on these projects a lot, I have a bunch of these strips of 1/4 inch plywood from other projects. So I just systematically took a strip, cut it shorter and shorter, laid it out in between these grooves, and sorted out how long it needed to be. And then, of course, I went and cut the 2 big pieces. Now, when I install these, I will use a really high quality construction adhesive. I'll run these down. I'll brad nail these pieces down against this ledge, and I will most likely actually try to fill in that gap a little bit with little strips of wood, but I'm going to play that by ear, okay? And I might throw a few screws in there just for good measure. But the real benefit of doing this is, I think we all intuitively know this, the arch, the way that this transfers energy is, we're using the tension, I guess, or the watt of the plywood to flatten itself, and we're actually bending it into this arch. Now, obviously, this isn't firm enough for a roof here, but even just the tension of that plywood being arched up like this is already making this relatively rigid. So when it's attached permanently, then I will go through with those little strips of 1/4 inch ply, like I just showed you right down there. And I will actually start right here at the middle, at the seam between these two. And I will roll over, I'll put construction adhesive, and I'll laminate from up underneath here, those strips across here. And I'll just, this will be one of those things where I'll have to play it by ear. I'll make it as thick as I need it to firm it up. But you guys will also notice, obviously this wall will be closed up here. Now, I didn't build it all the way to the top because I didn't know the exact arch, but this wall will come here, and this is one of those things that'll take a long time. And I will cut this wall to that perfect arc right there. These little beams here, I'll add on some additional piece to line up here, attach it there. So you guys can imagine this is going to be firm here when it's mounted there. I'll do something very similar up here in the front. And then we'll build this laminated arch back here. Now, how much will it take? How many laminations of that 1/4 inch ply strips will it take to firm this up? That's one of those things that I don't know. I'm kind of thinking it'll probably be about 1 inch thick. So that will be 4 total. And then, so 1 1/4 inch if you count the 1/4 inch of this outside ply. But we'll play it by ear because, like I said, this is something I've never done before. But the proof of concept is coming into play. The advantage of all this is it will save some time. Now, I'm certainly typically not rushing these projects, but if you could save a little bit of time by being smart, I say why not? But it's also going to reduce material use because I won't have to construct beams across each of these. Now, this method wouldn't work in every scenario as far as roof profile, but in a side-to-side scenario like this, I think it works really well. Now, what you guys notice here is that the arch up in the front is a lot higher than the arch in the back. And this was a really interesting thing I found out. If you guys watched the last video, you knew that I fit this to the bed of this particular pickup truck, and the front of this is actually 1 3/4 inches narrower than the back. So as you guys can imagine, as that plywood lays out, that 1 3/4 inches, which kind of surprised me, wider part in the rear, lower that arch by that much, and then where it's narrower, and of course this is a very gradual narrowing here up toward the front, it naturally created this gradual arch. So you're getting an arch side to side, but you're also getting an arc, not an arc, but you're getting an angle going up toward the back, which I think it doesn't look super attractive right now because this is just a mock-up, but if you kind of try to imagine, that's going to give it a really nice look, and it's probably going to be quite aerodynamic too. Now, you guys will probably notice that this center section seems to go down a little bit. The pressure from these boards pushing outward is actually pushing that center section out just a little bit. I don't know if you guys can see that angle there. So when I've kind of done this by hand, but when I go to do the final install, I'll run a clamp from the top of this window opening here all the way to the other side and squeeze that center section, and it'll level it out. So basically the transition from the back up, this will be nice and level and smooth. And I can kind of tune that in by squeezing in that center section a little bit. And as you guys also see, I put a little, just a little, I mean, there's hardly any tension on that, but just a little beam in the center temporarily just to kind of push it up. And I can tune that and move it up a little bit. But I'm actually really excited about this roof method. I feel pretty confident it's going to work. Before any of you guys try it yourself, I would recommend waiting till at least next week or next video, because I think next video I'll have this permanently in place. But if it does work in certain circumstances, if you want to put an arc in your roof, this is going to be a pretty easy way to do it. And one thing I found about getting these arcs is they almost always are more organic and look better if you use the natural arc that's developed when you take a material that wants to lay flat and you compress it on the sides, if that makes any sense. If you try to artificially create an arc, it very rarely works out, particularly on a large scale, like something like a camper here. One final thing is, it's a little hard to imagine, but this bottom piece would sit on the floor of the bed of the pickup truck. At the tallest point here, I think I measured that as 52 inches opening here. But, you guys can imagine, this will give a pretty voluminous perspective of how much space you'll have down in this pickup truck bed with this shell on here. And as far as weight, I haven't been weighing anything systematically, but as it sits right now, I mean, it might be with these 1/4 inch plywood on the top, it might be 100 pounds or something. This thing is turning out to be very, very light with the cedar and everything. I mean, there'll be a little bit of weight added when I get the door in place and the windows in place and stuff like that. But I think I made a rough estimate. I think this thing will weigh 200 to 300 pounds when done. I think it'll probably easily just be, right around that 200-pound mark, give or take a little bit. So very light, probably barely perceptible on the truck. One other final thing is, I've done a lot of arches. I don't know what the best way to say it is, but on my last 3 builds, this one being included, and I think they're beautiful. They tend to be aerodynamic, but it also sheds water well, and that's an important factor for these. So it's something to think about, and keep in mind when this is all attached permanently, I'll trim down this little excess here of the cedar. I'll give it a nice round off, so it'll be a very nice transition, you know, from the roof down here. So nice shedding of water. It'll look real nice and clean and crisp. But all right, guys, hope everyone's doing well. Let me know what you think. And next video, we should have this on permanently. And if this works out really well, this will be a new method, at least to me, as far as building and attaching these roofs. Thanks, guys.